KMR. Our next board meeting? It will be on the 17th.
On the 17th, right? Pretend it's March 17th.
Good. You want to say hello to St. Patrick's Day?
We're still in solution. Just gas services. They can get under.
Yeah, it's just not letting it go live.
Well, in that case, welcome everybody to the April 3rd, 2025 Webster Town Board Workshop. We have 4 agenda items tonight. We're going to switch up the order a little bit, and Dan Reardon from Penfield Volunteer Ambulance is going to do the first slot. So Dan, I will hand the baton to you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Dan Bearden, Penfield Ambulance. Just part of our contract with the town is to report quarterly on our performance and just be transparent in terms of our efforts for the town of Webster. Last quarter was quite busy. January and February were record call volume months for us. Still able to maintain 96 to 97% coverage. We now have a full year of data. We were under contract on March 30th of 2024, and now have been serving the town of Webster for the last 12 months, which now shows us good data in terms of how we staff and operate and position ourselves to take calls. Again, throughout the year, just below 97%. January, February, I mean, not to give a public health lecture, but high ammonia and flu seasons, COVID was mild, and then in March, everything actually took a dive. Call volume was actually down about 10 to 15%. I'm hoping it's just a nice break for our crews. We just can't sustain on third-party billing if there continues to be a drop. But hopefully, there's some seasonality behind our call volume, and March's drop compared to January and February was just some seasonality. Other than that, things are going well. We do have our DBAs into the state of New York. Now we're in newer uniforms that say Penfield Webster Ambulance, and our other DBA is Penfield Webster EMS. So nice progress on that front. And we are currently working with the town for our 5-year contract between attorneys and board of directors from our party and the town board. Any questions?
No? Doing a great job, appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Jenny or Jennifer?
Hi, Mike, you mentioned the third-party billing. Wasn't there the change where Medicare was billed, or you could bill directly to Medicare, or the payments come directly to EMS?
So
Is
this,
that kicked in?
so Medicare and Medicaid have always directly reimbursed us, thankfully. Private insurance, there was a new law that went into effect January 1st of 2025, where private insurers now have to submit the check directly to us versus MVP or Blue Cross Blue Shield submitting the check to the patient. It looks kind of confusing. That check needs to be written then to the ambulance corps. That is now illegal, but insurance companies do not like that. So they've taken it upon themselves because they want us in network. Most ambulance corps are out of network to actually try to reduce their reimbursement rate to the fixed Medicare or Medicaid cost. So we're battling, things on all fronts. Complex industry, as Tom has said, but we're getting through it. So doing our best.
And I know you got to go, Dan. I would just say that seeing a full year of statistics, we always kind of felt like it's around 4,800 calls a year in the town of Webster. Unfortunately, just the way we got data reported from our previous provider, doubling up on the, the basic calls versus the ALS calls, threw a little wrench in that equation. So this is nice, because this will help, I'm sure, both you and your organization on budgeting and just staffing and all that. It also is going to help the town board as we move forward. I know we've been using this stuff for negotiation of the long-term contract. And hopefully what will be the town of Penfield's government and the town of Webster's government getting together in the next couple of months. And leveraging the fact that the two of us are using Penfield Webster ambulance, which back on wood will be what it's called.
What it's called now?
So that we're approaching, the two governments need to approach how we subsidize annually your organization consistently, in my opinion. And Russ Siskin's helped a lot with that.
Yes, he has.
Coach us on how to best do that. I've had discussions with Supervisor Leanouts. I think he's all on board because what we've discussed makes a lot of sense. So I want to thank you and Glenn and the gang for this last year, really 15 months you came through for us when things went a little sideways. Love the way you have an asset renewal policy with your ambulances. They're up to date, they're modern. That's good for the EMTs, it's good for the paramedics, and it certainly is good for the patients. And from everything I've heard, and I think, John, you've got your finger on the pulse of this more, your employees like working at Penfield Hunter Ambulance.
Yes, they do.
I'm tickled pink in how things are going, and I'm looking forward to getting that long-term contract done. I'm sure you are too.
Definitely.
All right, Danny, thanks.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. No problem.
All right, picked up a little time here. So, does that mean, Keith, that you're gonna go extra on the GIS presentation?
I hope not. I'm gonna try to stick to my 10 minutes. Okay, so I guess it's my turn. We have been talking about GIS, I think, since the day I started, and we finally had a chance to give a bit of an update to everyone about where we're at and where we're going. So just to get the nomenclature out of the way, GIS stands for Geographical Information Systems, and in its simplest format, it's an ability to do asset documentation and setting that to mapped coordinates. So making it graphical in nature on a map itself. And an asset can be anything from a manhole to a sidewalk to land use, zoning, easements, roads, etc. It's anything that would, for the town, would be a piece of infrastructure. And we know we have thousands and thousands of points of data representing the town's infrastructure. So just what people really look, when they say GIS, they think of these types of maps. And we'll kind of focus, to the right is one of our street lighting districts. The center kind of shows some of our sanitary system, and then to the far left, which is a little harder to read, is some easements over top of where we might have some infrastructure that we need access to. So really, behind this is a lot of information that when you click on any one of these points, either now or into the future, will tell you more about what maybe is going on. So for example, in the lighting district, we might find, if we click on one of those red dots, we find information about the luminaire, when it was replaced, what year it was installed, etc. And representative information about other types of assets as well would show up either with your sewer, your roadway, or even your easements. So, just to talk about who uses this information, and it's really a wide swath of individuals and people. It starts anywhere from any of the town departments, probably the most specific would be engineering, highway, sewer, and planning, but also our consultants, the builders, and their consultants, as well as the general public. It's a repository, if you will, of information that shows our built infrastructure, and many organizations and people are interested in what that is. From a general public perspective, a lot of times they will want to know, they will want to click on their piece of property, and they may want to understand what that easement is that's on that property, or they may have a manhole, they want to understand what that manhole might be, or we will use it as a larger tool to help us do assessments, if you will, and maybe we think about where we have sidewalk systems, where we don't have sidewalk systems, and where we maybe put those in the future, as some examples. So, our GIS, we know that it's got a lot of information in it. We also have come to the realization that it's probably got a lot of duplicate data in it. And unfortunately, it's not been updated significantly, I would say, for a while. And at that point, what this does is it makes it an unreliable tool for us. And this really became very apparent to Mark and I when we were during our EPA audit, and one of the questions that the EPA asked us was, how many stormwater outfalls do you have? And we said confidently, 638. Is it close? And they looked at us and they said, 638? That's a lot for a town your size. And we said, well, that's what we felt confident that's what our GIS was telling us. And I said, So one of the comments that came back is, you might want to check into that. So we did, and what we come to realize with our base is that really we have maybe half of that. We're not even sure if that's the right number yet, but that we had a lot of duplicate information. And then as we started getting down into it, we're like, ooh, some other things just weren't looking right to us. And as we start reaching out to highway and sewer, we start to find out that maybe some information isn't mapped correctly. And so the audit really became, I would say, our little canary in the mine that we've got a bigger issue here that we need to deal with. So how did we get here? Well, I think the simplest way I can frame it is just a lack of consistency. We've had several staffing changes. There have been priorities and changes in focus. We've not maybe been consistent with updating as we should have been. And really what you find is when you're building out the GIS, you want to have a very structured database, layering system, if you will. And you want to make sure you have protocols and standard operating procedures in place so that the information is going into the GIS consistently, so that we know how to get it back out. So what's our plan? Well, we kind of came up with a 3-phase plan, and the first phase was really a get our head around it type of phase, and this was our discovery phase. And it began shortly after we had our GIS technician leave for other opportunities, and Mark Stein, our assistant town engineer, he took the lead to jump into it and really figure out what's going on. And at that point, we started to get a sense, as I mentioned, about the unreliability on some of the issues that we have with the data with GIS. But to be fair, we really don't, neither Mark nor I have the expertise in GIS, and honestly, we didn't have the bandwidth to dig into it. We also thought to ourselves, well, then this is an opportunity for us to go hire, and what we found is hiring is challenging in this market, especially in this area, in this skill set. And really, what we were hoping to look for in a hire would be an entry to mid-range level type of individual, someone that's got 3 years of experience. But we found that bringing that person in, given the condition of our GIS, was not going to be real valuable to the town. You really need to have a better established tool, if you will, in place before you bring somebody in and then run with it. So we engaged with a company called Innovative Contracting Services, and I'll talk about them a little bit later here. But they are essentially a data management company. They take digital information and organize it and put it into a format that is useful to the end users. And we'll talk about some of their experience here later on. But as a result of this discovery phase, and with the help of ICS, we actually were able to come up with an approach, a rational approach to updating GIS. So that gets us into phase 1. And this is where we're currently at today. This is what I'll call the heavy lift. This is where we're going to work through our ICS and have us, we'll be confirming end user access, their needs. We need to reestablish our GIS structure. Again, we need to look at our data. We need to figure out what needs to be consolidated, what needs to be deleted, and what kind of reconciliation we need to do with the accuracy of it. Get our protocols in place for adding new information and standardizing that. And then as part of this phase, we also expect to expand our GIS and update it using these new protocols. But what we believe will happen is, and what our Venn diagram is showing, is that we think we're going to be, it will take us 2, 3, 4 passes through this process to really refine and get ourselves to a place that we feel comfortable that we've got a good approach to getting our GIS updated and keeping it updated. Because at this point, it's in a bit of disrepair. And then finally, phase 2 is sort of the long range, the long out into the future. And this is, at this point, we're going to have a GIS base by the time we get to this phase that we feel comfortable in. We actually will feel comfortable enough to make it available to the public for their use, which is a large goal of ours. And we'll make a determination at that time if we're ready for hiring a GIS technician, or if it makes better financial sense to outsource it. But that is a to be determined moment for us once we get to a good spot within phase 1. So a little bit about ICS. Like I said, we've been working with them as part of the discovery phase. They are, this is a quote taken straight out of their, some of their literature, and I think it really does summarize what we are trying to accomplish in generic terms, and then specifically for our GIS. And they have a background where what kind of intrigued us about them is they do a lot of utility work. So a lot of it's documentation for utilities. So Avangrid is one of their big customers, and they've had to take, it sounds like, a monumental amount of information and do exactly what we're looking for them to do for us here in the town of Webster. So through the discovery phase, where they did their, kind of gave us a high-level understanding of what we've got going on, where they think that we could make improvements. They helped us pull together an approach to make this happen, and that approach is part of the proposal or contract, if you will, for phase 1, which I believe tonight we have a resolution on the town board for the supervisor to sign that. We feel that this we'll have a completed phase 1 by midsummer. Now, all said and done, there's about between 90 days, around 90 days of actual work, but And midsummer is longer than that, but given vacations and the needs for them to produce information for us to review, give them feedback, and kind of go back and forth through that iterative process, we'll be out into midsummer. Additionally, as we are bringing more of this database, this GIS online and getting it finalized, we'll be reaching out to other departments and making sure that, hey, this is how we're taking it. Is this what you're looking for? And also wanting to understand what is it that they have in their files, whether they're hard files or digital, that we can start chewing on and incorporating into this. So, like I said, we're targeting a midsummer of this year to get us to that point. And I know one of the questions that came through from Patty was who would be the project manager on this, and I will tell you that Mark Stein will be the project manager. So he will be the day-to-day individual who will have constant contact with ICS and our departments and making this happen.
Have we ever looked into the grant for this?
A grant?
Yeah, for this project?
No.
I believe there's something out there for, municipalities, that we could look into it.
Okay. We can.
That would help.
We could look into a grant. I would say that that would delay us moving forward with this project, since we do not have a grant in place for it.
But have we ever looked into it before we pursue this
We do
project?
not.
Quick question is, were any of the other departments involved in the selection of GIS?
For other departments?
Yes.
No. GIS sits with the engineering department, so we took the lead on.
So there was no collaboration with sewer or highway with respect to this decision? Because I know they probably should be involved, at least on the other side, right?
And they will be, yes.
So with respect to, because I know we've been talking about GIS for years now, and I know we did have somebody on it, working with GIS, and which is why I'm a little alarmed that we have so much duplication in the system. If we had someone dedicated to it, I don't know whether there weren't protocols established back then, or where the other departments weren't involved. But hopefully going forward, Mark, we'll put those protocols in place and involve the other departments, so we don't have the overlap or, duplication of information.
I know that within their proposal, what we've talked about, and our end goal is to have basically an SOP on how, from the beginning, how to put a TIFF file into the system and how to have it managed for years to come is part of this process. So when something, myself steps in, we can pull that out and be like, oh, we're ready to go with this.
So they're gonna have to, I take it they're gonna have to go in and clear out the duplication and all that first. I would imagine it would take some time, correct?
That's a good portion of the time here, yes.
So-
And if we find that what we'll have to do is until we get actually into physically doing some of that, as well as doing some of the updating, is when we will figure out maybe how much of that has to be completely cleared out.
Would you be repairing the existing systems or scrapping them all together and replacing them?
My expectation is it's more of a repair than a scrap, but I can't say that there would not be some wholesale removal and update.
Would it be possible to set some sort of dates to give feedback to the town board as part of your process?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to, yeah, 'cause we're talking midsummer, I would like hopefully we can have an update at least once a month.
Okay. We can do that.
And if you could look into the grants too. I mean, I would like to, if you want to, I would like to, you know, speak with you if you would like, and to see what the option out there was. Because I know with Monroe County Women-Owned Business Enterprise, we just got a grant for the, you know, our clerk department, you know, through that. So therefore, I know there's grants out there for municipality or any, you know, studies to improve the town.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. No,
I would
absolutely.
glad to help.
Okay, great, and I will actually, tomorrow I'll reach out to Maria in our office as well, and have her also start with our grant consultant as well.
Can I, Josh, you and I kind of ran into this in mid-2020, on basically what has happened in the last 10 years on GIS in town. We did have a person that's main job was to do GIS, to take as-built and input it into whatever computer system, so we know where these pipes are and all this stuff. But that person also was working in another department, I think, building inspection or code compliance.
Correct.
And once we started to peel back the onion of their workflow, after their boss no longer was with us, the DPW commissioner, we figured out pretty quickly that that person liked doing building inspections more than GIS. Did you know that sometimes there's things you do at your job that you don't like, Kyle? So that kind of led us to see that really there hadn't been any GIS work done for years. I shouldn't say any, but very minimal. And one of the things we found during that process is that we had a retainer, and I'm not positive, but I think it was with MRB, to assist our GIS person. And I think in the budget annually from 2016 up through 2020, it was $15,000 or $20,000. So that the town board and DPW knew that that was important, that we needed to not only have somebody who was a very high-paid individual, may I say, W-2, but also to give that person $15,000 to $20,000, you know, of a firm to help on that. And we looked at those 5 years of budgets, and it ended up, I guess it's good news, I don't think it is, that we spent about $1,000 to $2,000 a year, which you could say, isn't that great? We came way in under budget. What it meant was we didn't utilize MRB, so we had a guy that was doing building inspections instead of GIS, and that guy had no, and his boss had no desire to interact with MRB. So this is what we had. At that time, I mean, I didn't even know what GIS was, but pretty quickly you start to figure out, and I think from the presentation tonight, everybody, the page that has the pictures of the lighting district and all of those things, just to show you how this affects us every single day, and why it's so important to have this mapping and know where this stuff is, and be able to click on it and know how old it is, and maybe plan for the future on when that's going to have to be replaced. I mean, that's master's degree in GIS. We don't have a GED yet. It just happened today, didn't it, Art?
Absolutely.
All right, Art calls me, and I don't want to steal your thunder
No.
for when you present, but when Art calls me and says, "What happened again, Tom? We're going along on a project, and boom, we hit an 8-inch lateral pipe that we don't have in our GIS system, so we don't know it's there." I can't tell you how many times over the last 5+ years that I've been a supervisor that I get calls from highway or building or whatever, that they now have come across something that we didn't know was there. And I'm going to tell you right now how much that costs when all of a sudden we got to go and do kind of whatever. I'll tell you that cost a lot more than had we back in 2015 to 2021 had somebody or a firm that was dedicated to updating this stuff. But that's water under the bridge. That's gone. I have an idea why we have duplicate stuff. I'm not gonna get into that right now, and it's speculation at best. I'm just excited at the fact, and I wanna thank Mark, and I wanna thank Keith, because I think they saw immediately, like, this is a major problem. Penfield, they have on their website an interactive thing for their citizens to go on and see where stuff is. That's where we should be at. We are a socioeconomic town. We should be at that point. But to Keith's point, we're at phase 0, 1, 2, 3. We got to crawl, walk, run. So I want to thank you. I'll get off my soapbox. I'm all for this. I love the fact that we'll get monthly updates on this, and I can't wait to roll into phase 1 or 2 or whatever, what we're going to do next, because we have to put the foot on the gas of this thing, or we're going to continue to have problems. We don't know our infrastructure. We don't know how old pipes are. We don't know what that lighting system is. We don't know any of that stuff. How can you run an organization that way? So I got nobody to blame but myself, because I've been running this organization for over 5 years. So the buck stops here.
Can I steal your thunder? So
Yeah.
our department, we see and review every stakeout that comes in for Webster. So
Can you use the microphone, please?
So we review every stakeout that comes into the town of Webster, and we have to review it and act on it. So I saw this on the agenda. In the last 10 days, which was pretty light, we had 251 stakeouts come in. For each and every one of those, we have to go to GIS. And we go through it throughout the day. If nothing's on GIS, then we have to go out there and manually look for it. So what Mark and Keith are doing impacts us greatly, and we're looking forward to having an accurate system.
I agree, it's important, but to John's point, I do think it's important to have stakeholder input along the way before moving forward with a plan, because I just, if they don't have input to it, how do you know you're contracting for the right things?
And the stakeholders are,
Highway, the people who will use it, highway, sewer, I mean, clearly engineering's working on it. Josh in community development, I don't know if you had input into the selection here?
Yeah, I was involved in the initial conversations with ICS.
The only other, I guess, point or question I would make is that while we're going through this process, we should probably make a determination whether we're going to hire a GIS person or we're going to outsource it, so that when this report comes through, we are ready to move forward. We don't have to spend another 2 months deciding if we're going to hire someone or not. Sort of chewing gum and walking at the same time.
I will say that because, in hindsight, I would have had Pat Stevens here tonight and Brayton Connor, because Brayton and Keith and I, on the W-2 employee, did a lot of calisthenics and found that because of the hiring market and because of the specialization of this skill, we were having a really hard time. And maybe the job market will change from when we were doing that. And that made us kind of change the way we looked at this and said, and it really, as Mark got deeper into it, he said, really, we don't need a person right now. We need a specialist to come in and kind of straighten this out and get us at, whatever. Then, as I think I understood you said in this presentation, and it's written in there, as we go into the next phase, that's when you start to determine, you go out and hire somebody, and the world's fluid. I don't know, maybe these tariffs will make everybody lose their jobs, and there'll be just a ton of people out in the job market in 3 months looking for GIS specialty jobs. Was that the case when Brayton, you and I were doing this back in the fall? Yeah, that can change, the world's fluid. So we could hire a W-2 person, right? If it stays static, like it was back in the fall, my bet is that we're going to be hiring a firm. But we'll see. I'll reserve judgment.
To caveat, we could, the level, FTE, full-time employee, that we would try to hire for, equivalent to a salary of, say, $69,000, was not readily available.
Yeah.
I understand that, and I remember that, and I remember the search, and I remember Braden actually, boosted a listing, paid a little more to get it out there and really try to find somebody, so I agree, it's extraordinarily important to have this and update this data for all of the reasons you mentioned, and there's probably a handful more. Art, were you involved at all in the input as a stakeholder for this data and what your requirements would be?
I was not, however, I've worked with Josh in the past on previous projects like this, and I trust these individuals to at least get us off the ground to a place where we can then come together and discuss what we need.
I think that's an important fact to bring up is with stakeholders, we're not excluding them, we're just not ready for them yet. It's like we need to get this system correct and ready, and then we go to Art and we go to Pat, and like, okay, what are your issues on this? Now that it's working and we can input what we need to input, change what we need to change, we're ready to run. Instead of, I know what your issues are. When I toured the facility the first time, I'm like, well, this will be on GIS, I'll just look at it when I get back, you're like, you won't find it on GIS. How is this not on GIS? Like, it blew my mind.
This could very well be a situation where less is more.
Okay, fair, that's a fair point. My other question is, what other firms were considered for this work?
So as part of the initial phase 0, we had Day Engineering. They were about double the price. And we have our billing rates for MRD.
Do we have a budget that we set aside for this project, correct?
There is, yeah.
Okay, but we don't know, like now that we're gonna like hiring a firm or anything like that, we don't know how much it's gonna be. So the cost is gonna be,
It's a not to exceed of $69,300 for this phase.
Which is within the budget.
well, it would be nice if we could, look into just a little bit of the grant, anything that we can get, that would help our taxpayer too as well.
Anything else?
I think we covered it.
All right. Well,
Thanks,
thank you, Keith and Mark, our town engineering department. I applaud the work, and I know that from what I saw in the presentation, you will be working, it makes sense, with the Arts and Pat's and Josh's, whatever, as you move forward. That's great. All right. Well, next up is, so I hope we didn't make it such that the boys can't play baseball now. Yikes. Because you're starting out about 26 minutes later than we had scheduled. Sorry. But our next item up is a presentation on a potential code changes related to code enforcement. I think both Josh and Keith from the Community Development and Code Enforcement Department are presenting. So, hand it down to you guys.
Thank you. So before we get into tonight's presentation, I just want to take a moment to formally introduce to the town board our code enforcement officer, Justo Santiago. He joined our team in October of 2024 and was previously the code enforcement officer for the town of Carrington. I'd also like to just go through a brief recap of some recent history of our efforts to kind of strengthen our property maintenance code. We first came to the board in the fall of 2022, alerting the board to some issues with our code in regards to property maintenance and a lack of applicable provisions that would help us to tackle some of these problem properties. So we did have a subsequent presentation in February of 2023 explaining what our proposed property maintenance code would look like. and we ultimately held a public hearing in April, and the board ultimately did adopt that property maintenance chapter. We did have a subsequent appearance last summer in July of 2024, where we came back to the board for a modification to the language dealing with penalties for offenses. And with Husto now on board, and the nature of some of the complaints that we've been getting lately, we found more holes, if you will, or lack of tools to address certain issues. So that is what tonight's presentation will cover. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Husto.
Good evening, my name is Husto. So today I'm presenting the several subjects, the code enforcement procedure. That's going to be a new chapter, is explaining basically what I do from the moment I receive the complaint till the end. Also the vehicle storage is going to be just an addition. Also on-street parking restrictions, portable storage containers and roll-off dumpsters and vacant properties. Those are going to be additions to the town code.
Yeah, so tonight is our first meeting to do the initial presentation of the code updates. We would like to follow up, probably not at the next town board meeting, most likely at the May 1st meeting, to allow enough time for both the board and the public to review the proposed changes, provide feedback, and then once we finalize that, we will come back for a potential vote on proposed amendments.
So for the code enforcement procedure, this is going to be a new chapter. Like I was saying, it's going to explain from when we receive a complaint, either online, email, staff observation, and etc., phone call. And so this is going to explain, as soon as I receive the complaint, a site inspection is going to be conducted to confirm if reported violation exists. So I'm going to go out there, take some photos, if the violation exists. If not, there's no violation, and I can just close the case. But if there is a code violation, then that's where the code enforcement procedure begins. First step is going to be the violation letter. It's going to be initial, just correspondence and alerting the property owner to a violation. That one's just going to be the first step. It's going to show the code violations that they have, the time I actually observed the violation, and just notifying the owner. Sometimes they'll respond to the code violation letter, and then I can just address to them what has to be addressed and be in compliance with the town. If I don't receive a response, that's where the notice and order, and that's going to be basically a compliance letter stating a certain time and date, or a date that has to be complied by. That's going to be the next step. After that, if nothing's been done, it's going to go to the appearance ticket. That's going to be a set date and time with the town court. And after that, it's going to be the court hearing once everything goes through.
So just to clarify, this is currently not included in our code, so we're looking to just codify what our current policy and procedure is.
So this is an example of the violation letter. It's going to have the owner's address, the case number as soon as we receive that complaint, the relevant code section, and the description of the violation and the corrective action. So as you can see on this letter, the corrective action is going to indicate what they have to do to be in compliance. this is gonna be the second step. Once I don't receive the response or they don't comply by a certain time frame, it's gonna be the same thing, owner's address, the case number, relevant code, but this time it's going to have a reasonable time period for the compliance. And on this letter also, there are gonna be the potential fines and penalties for non-compliance. It's gonna be on the second page. The first page is gonna be more of a description of the violation and the penalties, and also the corrected by date is going to be listed on there. And after they don't comply by the notice and order, the appearance ticket is going to be the last step. This is going to show the owner's address, the violation code section, and also the date and time for the court hearing. It's going to show all the code section that they violated, and the date that they violated the violation. So to add on to the town code, the vehicle storage, I've been receiving numerous calls and emails in regards to abandoned, uninspected, unlicensed, inoperable, discarded, or junk vehicles on the property. Also, for the outside storage, we want to strengthen the outside storage for recreational vehicles, and also for commercial vehicles and construction vehicles on the property. Also, the outside parking for storage and licensed vehicle, it doesn't specify or have enough detail in regards to licensed vehicles. Sometimes they'll be parked on the front lawn or in the rear of the property or even on the side of the property. And also on storage on vacant properties. There's numerous vehicles on vacant properties, like unlicensed, licensed, and this is just going to strengthen the code. That way, instead of having, like on the picture at the top right, it's going to show multiple recreational vehicles that's being stored on the property. In a smaller neighborhood, it's going to control the amount of recreational vehicles that the owner can have. There could be exemptions in regards to if you have a larger lot or more acreage on your property, there's going to be exemptions in regards to that. The next one is going to be the on-street parking restriction. This is also going to be an add-on. No person shall park a motor vehicle within the cul-de-sac unless said vehicle is parallel to and immediately adjacent to the gutter. I've received phone calls from Highway Department and also Transportation for school buses, and there's a vehicle parked in the middle of the cul-de-sac, and it's just making it hard for them to turn around. Also, safety for children playing in the cul-de-sac. I'm just receiving multiple phone calls in regards to that, and in the code section, it doesn't specify also for cul-de-sac parking. There is parking restrictions between a certain time, November 1st to April 1st, that's when there's a parking restriction, and that's pretty much it. So it's just in addition and strengthening the town code. Also, portable storage containers and also the roll-off dumpsters. It's just going to be an addition to the roll-off dumpsters to the existing portable storage containers. This one is just going to regulate the total number of days on the property location, and the permit will continue to be required. So the only addition to the town code is just going to be the roll-off dumpsters. Some properties have roll-off dumpsters, and they're going to have them there for several months, and there's no permit required for the roll-off dumpsters. There's a permit that is required for the portable storage containers, but nothing for dumpsters. I know there's several properties that have these roll-off dumpsters, and they don't even have a permit on the property for any addition. They just have them there. for a number of weeks, months, and this is just gonna control the dumpsters on the property. The new subsection for vacant properties is going to define the vacant properties, also the secure and routine monitoring of the vacant properties, so that way I can go onto the property, inspect it for open or secure. Sometimes there's properties that are open and I can't go onto the property and actually check to see if there's a door open in the rear of the property or even on the side of the property, see it for the right of way. Also, this is going to take more photos to check the rear yard of the property for vacant properties. That way we can do more of an inspection for combustible waste materials, overgrowth for grass, unabandoned or unlicensed vehicles. And then there's exceptions, vacant lots and developed areas and agricultural lands. And that would sum it up. So we're just going to be awaiting for legal reviews, feedbacks, and town board resolutions to set up a public hearing, hold public hearing, make final edits, and adopt into the town code. And this is going to continue to aid staff in addressing resident concerns.
Thanks, Susto and Josh. Any questions or comments from the board?
No. You, the only question I had was on your answer on your last slide, so good job, thanks. So you feel that this will give us a stronger standing should we have to go to court, is that correct?
Yes, that is
I
correct.
know we've had some issues in the past.
And that new process that Husko described is a culmination of a lot of the discussions that we've had with our legal team in an attempt to shore up the whole court paperwork process. So we'd like to get that, as I mentioned earlier, into our code so there's no ambiguity on what our official process is.
Now, I don't know, if this next question, I know, Kyle, I assume you will be reviewing these?
Yeah, the draft of the code, I'll work. Have you sent that over to John yet?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I just noted that you said you were waiting, just wasn't sure if it was with us yet. Okay.
We just finished the final edits earlier this week, so we will certainly get that out to everybody.
Okay, yeah, if you want to send it to both of us, I'll be reviewing it.
Okay, thanks.
We'll also be posting it on our website so that the public has an opportunity to review, and then hopefully we'll receive some feedback at the public hearing and go from there.
So what does the current permitting of a dumpster consist of?
A dumpster or a portable storage
Roll
container?
off.
Well, I think right now our code is essentially silent on roll-off dumpsters.
So I will assume that if I want to get a dumpster for my house to get rid of a bunch of debris, right?
Right.
Now I have to get a permit and pay money for it?
If it's going to be there for an extended period of time, I believe if we're mirroring the portable storage container regulations and we're just adding the roll-off dumpster into that, there are certain provisions where you will not need to get a permit. For example, if you have an active building permit and you're doing a renovation project that requires storing of materials and tools, you do not have to get an additional permit to have the storage container. But they are limited because we certainly have some properties where these things have been there for months or years. So we're trying to curtail that from happening.
I'm raising this because to rent a roll-off or dumpster or whatever you want, it's very expensive. Now
Yes.
we're going to tack on more money for a permit.
Yeah, I think the cost is minimal. I think it's maybe $10 or $20 for
Okay.
a permit. But again, it's we have some control over these things not lingering and being there for too long. Currently, you're allowed to have, a permit gives you up to 6 months to keep it on your property, and you're also allowed to renew it for a 3-month period after that.
I assume you can't store it in the street.
That is correct. Or on the grass, it needs to be placed on the driveway most of the time, I believe.
So if it's your own property, okay, and I'm gonna pay $400 to $500 for a roller, why does the town care whether they put it in the driveway or the front yard?
Well, I think that it's just a matter of keeping a neat and orderly appearance in our residential neighborhoods. I think that it's a pretty common requirement in municipalities. You don't want things just haphazardly all over the yard.
I also think it's a requirement of the roll-off company, because they've got to be able to drive the truck up to drop it off and
Sure, but
be able to pull it out,
A
so.
lot of these companies have pads where if you don't have a wide enough driveway, there are pads they can put down for it. So it doesn't incur the damage. All right, I'm just going down a rabbit hole, we'll talk about this later.
I mean, I
Thank you,
think it's
guys.
important to make the changes, but there's.
I agree.
I think it's fantastic, and being able to enforce some of these things is important, but at the same time, you don't want to penalize people who are doing the right things.
Correct.
So say you're getting your house remodeled, and you just have, like a short period where that dumpster's gonna be there, because it's just, demo day or a week. Do you have to get a permit for a week, or is it just if it's a longer period of time?
We have the ability to use some discretion.
Okay.
We do. I mean, there have been instances where Husto has reached out to a property owner and they've said, oh, I was just cleaning out my basement, it'll be gone by tomorrow. We're not gonna open up a case and fine them and pursue something like that. It's really just for the folks that refuse to comply.
I understand, that makes sense. Thank you.
Josh, so the only thing I would ask is that you get Bridget, I think, uploads to the website on page 2. Meeting number 2 would be made first,
Yes, we're gonna make that
and then
change.
meeting 3 would be the earliest
Subsequent to
date.
that. Correct.
Good. Just so anybody who pulls this down has the right.
Right. No, we're gonna make that correct.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. And Usto, I apologize, boys. I hope it's not too late to play baseball. But don't blame your dad, blame me. Okay? They're shaking their heads. Yes, yes. These are citizens of Webster, Kyle. They're like, yes, I can blame him. Great. Get him young. Anyway, our next and last workshop agenda item tonight is an update on our 12,000 linear feet of sanitary sewer conveyance pipe project to support Fairlight plant, the Tibor Road to the trunk line on Phillips Road. And we had, oh geez, we had people here from, Paul's not, so this is Costage and Eric, not Paul.
Correct, Paul's here for support as he's been,
Oh, I know.
with the project the entire time.
Gotcha.
This is Costage as well.
So, Mike and Art, I'm going to tell you.
Okay. So we are here to discuss 2 change orders. And we're going to give a little project overview of where we are at this point. So, you want to go ahead and do that?
Sure. So I think I was here about a year ago at this time, kind of introducing the project to this board. And it's just a reminder to that project. This is associated with the Fairlight project. It's a sanitary sewer upsizing to allow for the additional flows from that facility. In this first slide, you can see about 95% of the project has been completed. They're kind of in the final stretch right now. Actually, since this slide, I think they even advanced another manhole or 2 more down the road. They actually have 2 manholes left.
Of the sanitary.
Of the sanitary. They have to go back to their own, replace some storm sewer in Schlegel and do some restoration work. As you've driven by Schlegel, you've seen it's not finished. a lot of progress has been made since this started, and unlike, not unlike any other construction project, there have been change orders associated with this. And most of them have been fairly minor, quantity adjustments and the like, but I believe the two that are on the town board agenda are related to change orders 3 and 5, and I believe those were over the $50,000 that needed town board approval. So first one, change order 3, over by, well, this is the change order 5, but change order 3, just going in chronological order, was associated with slight relocation of some sewer in Boulder Industrial Park. The original plan for the entire project was that the new sewer stay in the same trench, same location as the existing sewer to ensure that it maintained, stayed within the easements, and that the variable high bedrock throughout this whole area wouldn't be encountered. So the goal with this project is wherever the sewer is before, it's going to go back in the same spot, just larger to accept these flows. Over by Bolter, there's a large 54-inch diameter water authority distribution main that was put in after the sanitary sewer was put in. The record plans that we were provided from the water authority indicated that we had plenty of clearance, but when the contractor got out on site, it was evident that water authority ran into bedrock and they placed their water main right on top of the sewer. So to avoid damaging the giant distribution main, it was decided to reroute around that. So we had to add a couple manholes and a little bit extra run of sewer. Those were all essentially quantities that the contractor had given us prices for. So they just updated it based on the additional materials. And then change order 5, which is the larger one, along Schlegel Road from Phillips, basically up to the elementary school. It was discovered that asbestos pipe was the original pipe in the ground dating back over 50 years ago. The town did provide record plans, and in one small corner it made reference to an abbreviation for asbestos pipe, but that was not noticed by anybody during the design process, and we weren't made aware of it until actually the contractor started removing it and said, hey wait, that's not, we thought it was reinforced concrete pipe, this is asbestos concrete pipe. The difference is that asbestos is a contaminant, and per the Department of Labor needs to be disposed of properly. So it can't be disposed of in the same manner that normal pipe could be. So as a result of that, had to get Paradigm and another asbestos handling company on board to work with the contractor. This also did cause the contractor to submit a change order due to the delays in which it would take to remove it. They submitted change orders for increased time, increased labor to do that work. At this point, we're out of the asbestos. It's all been removed. The asbestos handlers are off-site now. So that was the larger change order, and that has since been addressed and remedied.
You said that there was a note, I would assume, on one of the drawings that
It was
there was asbestos there?
It was a hand-drawn plan. It was, a blurry scan of a plan, and it was in one corner. It wrote, it's ACP, but I think at our age it looked like an R. So, due to the depth of the sewer being about 20 feet deep, or 24 feet deep, it would be an OSHA restriction to go down in it. So, didn't go down. In hindsight, maybe should have gone down due to the age of the sewer and tested it beforehand. But I think this project was fast-tracked due to kind of when it needed to be done. And it would have been something that would have needed to be handled regardless, because there are first thing we did was look for alternate routes just to avoid this altogether. But there were no other easements available. This area where we're in, it was very narrow easements to begin with, only 15 foot wide easements, and there's water main and utility poles that were all in the way. So it was decided to remove the asbestos pipe. And it's our opinion that if it were put out to bid this way, likely would have incurred higher costs than if it were handled this way. If it were open bid, a contractor would have put higher prices on it if it were open bid versus Actually, the contractor was very willing to work with us.
I understand that. I guess, let me ask you this question, okay? Because I know in certain houses that were built in a certain year, and we go in to do renovations, it's automatically mandatory that we have to do an asbestos survey. Do those same requirements, are they germane to pipes that have been under the ground for 50 years?
No, and actually,
Okay.
replacement of pipes of this vintage are somewhat rare. Most of the pipes of that age are still in the ground today, so this is likely something the town of Webster going forward is gonna have to contend with, because we probably have quite a bit of infrastructure right
Right.
now that is asbestos concrete pipe.
All right, thank you.
So, and, here's the thing, I would like to thank Paul and Mike and your team to be able to pivot as quickly as they did to, and Thomas, we can pick Thomas, to try to keep this going, different hydraulics, and layouts and trying to minimize costs and working with our contractor. The fault lies with me. This is my project, that these weren't brought to the board. We were moving so quickly, that's on me. Paul was aware of everything, but
I'm gonna disagree with you on this one, all right? I appreciate you throwing on the sword, but I think the overriding thing that needs to be remembered here is that this project is being done because Fairlight needs that pipe larger. And we negotiated a contract with Fairlight because we decided as a town board last year that, hey, as long as we're making this for 2 million gallons a day that you're gonna do, we might as well, while you're in the hole, put a new pipe in. What if we made the pipe a little bigger and got the town 800,000 gallons more a day capacity? And for that 800,000 gallons more of capacity, the town's gonna pay 4% of this project. So Coke Fairlife is paying 96% of all costs of this project. The project was bonded for $7.1 million, I think, and when it came in, it was gonna be at about 6.3 million. So Coke Fairlife, who the one thing that I've said probably have just pounded into art, I don't care what happens on this, and then let me finish that statement, as long as you let Coke Fairlife know every step of the way. They need to know every contingency move, every change order, because they're paying 96% of it. And Coke Fairlife is like, we need this project done yesterday. They wanted this thing done in December of 2024 because their schedule was to start putting flow down through there on a test basis in April of 25. So as this was happening back in November and December, believe me, our office got a ton of calls because we had to close down Phillips Road. There was a lot of mess involved in this thing, all right? We're trying to move fast. We're trying to acquiesce to Coke Fairlife, who's ultimately paying 96% of it. This project now with these delays and this change order and whatever, which, Kyle, this is called non-pro-tunc, so we're just gonna, as Charlie taught me, we're gonna get this all papered up. I'm not going to put any blame on anybody on this. Coke Fairlife knows exactly what's going on. Coke Fairlife has been apprised of this. Coke Fairlife is at a point in their plant where they're not ready to put flow down here on a test basis in April. So on the last page of this, where this is going to be done in June, Coke Fairlife is like, that's okay, because we won't be able to test this thing probably until August or September. How many times will I have to say during this Coke Fairlife? They were the ones that needed to be appeased on this, because they're paying 96% of it. And they were made aware of it all the way along. I don't know if you, Art, I appreciate you saying that's your fault, this and that. The fact of the matter is, we're coming back, we're documenting this up. This is not, we are getting 96% of this project paid for by Coke Fairlife. They are well aware of these change orders, and they know that you do the math on these 2 change orders, 96% of that is being paid by Coke Fairlife. But I think that's very critical to this, and I appreciate what you said, Art. Now, we'll get you when it's something really your fault and it ended up being a real problem. Because, I mean, look, it's like a car accident. Someone could have swerved. Paul Adams knew this was going on. I knew this was going on. don't think I know if Kyle knows what was going on because you were just onboarding back in November and December. A lot of us knew. And no one said, geez, you know what, that's a change order that's gonna be over $50,000, which needs board approval. Because it's still a municipal bonded project. It's a hybrid bond of 10 years that is basically where we can stand on a mountaintop, because Barclay Damon and their attorneys for Coke Fairlight negotiated this and constructed this with our attorneys, both Charlie Genesi at the time, but our outsourced attorney, Jeff Storch from Harris Beach. Because we need to be above reproach and say, hey, we are not ingratiating a private company on public infrastructure. In this 10-year bond, you can stand on a mountaintop and say to the world, yeah, this is a municipal project. They're paying 96% of it. All by the book. That, to me, is the most important thing to remember on this. Not so much that we should have come here in November and December and gotten this change order taken care of. Ideally, yes. But in the whole scheme of things, we're good.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I do take ownership of these projects. But to your point, there was no time to wait for another board meeting and so forth. But I do appreciate that. I do take ownership of this stuff. And we'll keep trudging along and get it done.
So I'm confused, this is done, and like all this work is done, and it was done in October and November?
Change orders were issued at that point. Some of the work is done, some of the work is being completed.
Okay.
In October? That was, I could have sworn this was like a December sludge thing. Oh, shouldn't say sludge around sewer.
Change order.
Let me see when you first told
In
me that
November.
we found,
End of November.
end of November. I had a feeling it was going into December, and it was like, oh. And the first thing we did was go to Coke Fairlight.
We did. We absolutely did. And we cut open Phillips Road and right after.
Okay. So honestly, the town board members, if you have questions, concerns on this, because we have this as 2 of the 10 resolutions on our next meeting after this workshop, I mean, we can either talk about them right now during the workshop, or when we come in 5 minutes, because we got to shut down, right, Mark, and start again. We can continue to have discussion when we go to those 2 resolutions.
I just had a question about the asbestos, that's my question. And
Hey, we answered GIS, would we have
because
done
we
that?
have a standard when it comes to residents, I just was wondering if the standard was the same for underground, that's all.
All
Wasn't
well.
casting any aspersions whatsoever on the cost or the timing whatsoever.
So it sounds
Asking a
like-
question out of curiosity regarding asbestos.
Yeah, all DOL regulations were followed, and we had a asbestos certified handler, and we had a monitor on site.
I just want to say, my monologue was not because, John, I thought you were casting this aspersion, whatever. There's people in this room, there's people that are going to watch this thing. If I didn't say what I said, nobody's taking and tying that this is a Coke Fairlight project that they're paying 96% on, and that we cut a contract with them a year ago to do that. And that they needed this done fast. If that wasn't spoken, I don't think that's in the records, it won't be in the minutes if I don't say it. It had nothing to do with me interpreting that you were casting aspersions, whatever.
Just want to make sure.
But no, that was
Absolutely not.
I think that was a good question. So, again, all department labor rules were followed.
All right, well that, I think, concludes the workshop. I will say that I talked to Art about this today. The thing that I'm excited about on June 30th is that I talked to Paul Adams, our finance director, today. The payment due on the bond anticipation note for the $6.3 million that we went into debt last year in August on this project, that's due in August of 2025. And we pay the bill, whether it's interest only or principal and interest, and then per the contract, within a certain amount of days, Fairlight pays us 96% of that. We have to pay the bond directly. It's our bond. Then Paul, having all the costs, because we will know the exact actual cost by then, because this project will be done for a month and a half, 2 months, he now can tie up exactly what the last 9 years of the bond is. The bond anticipation note for the first year was kind of a, where are we at this point, and it's meant to be a 1-year thing. But then he's gonna lock in the interest rate for the remaining 9 years. It'll be a 9-year amortization schedule for the remaining principal and interest. And based on the contract we have with Coke Fairlight, when we make those bond payments in the years 2026 through 2034, per the contract a few days later, we will get 96% of that reimbursed to us by Coke Fairlight. So it's important to have the exact final dollars known. I'd like it to be a month to 2 months ahead of when that August, tying up paying the last year's band and setting up the last 9 years of the bond. Put a nice ribbon around it, and as long as we put it in the system to bill them for the next 9 years, my guess is over that time, the 800,000 gallons a day that we have other places that can lateral into, I couldn't even tell you how much income we'll pick up revenue from the one-time tie-in laterals, housing developments, or something on the Xerox campus. But I think when we figured it out, at our current $1,000 per EDU, or our industrial, whatever, I think it was around $5 million.
So the ROI on that was pretty good.
Yeah, and that's why the board at that time, if we remember when we did this deal, we said, well, 4% of a potentially $7 million project is $280,000. Why would we spend $280,000 to upsize this pipe by another 800,000 gallons? Potential for $5 million in one-time revenue as other developments lateral into that, or more likely, development on the Xerox campus.
That makes sense, Mike. All of it makes sense, and it was the right thing to do, it's the right thing to upsize it for the future, no questions about all of that. My only question is, and maybe it's a silly question, but if this change order was signed in November, it's April, why didn't we see it sooner, why didn't we know sooner?
We dropped the ball.
And
It came up, Paul brought it up at a meeting when we were putting this together, he goes, those are over 50,000, we really need to go to the board. And as soon as he said that, it went on this agenda. Art missed it. Like I said, Kyle, I'm not gonna hold you responsible because you were onboarding back in November and December, so you really weren't at the table for these meetings. Paul, myself, Patty, we're moving fast. I've already said this, I'm being redundant. My whole mantra was, does Coke know? Speak now or forever hold their peace. I don't want to get back in the room with their attorneys to have them swirl on us when they say, we weren't aware of these change orders and we never authorized this, and that's not part of the contract. That was my concern, and because that was such a focus of my concern, I took my eye off the ball of municipal law, if you want to say. Now, Kyle, I think, as you know, non-proton, we have a mechanism to remedy that. We're doing that tonight. So that's the answer.
Okay,
Just never thought about it, and when we did, I think it was a couple weeks ago in an all things sewers meeting, and Paul said, I think you gotta bring that to the town board, I think that's, paper it up. And here we are.
okay.
All right.
Do they not have to pay if it were, they agreed to it, but it isn't in writing, so we trust that they're gonna put this whole thing in writing and agree to pay for everything.
They
The
did.
difference.
It was always important for them to come back and just paper trail it. Yep, go for it, move ahead, we understand.
Okay.
The contract is for the bonding right now, which is 7.1 million. We were floating around 6.3, 6.4. These change orders get up to around 6.8, 6.9.
So it's still within
You
the
got
size of the bond, which is
Yeah.
good, so you don't
And
have
within
to.
the size of the contract.
Yep, okay.
And the contract that we have with Coke has flexibility to the final cost of the project changing. It has mechanisms for this type of stuff.
Yeah, most
So that's all good.
Most construction projects have contingencies with respect to change orders. Change orders are above and beyond the original scope of a project, and are subject to
Harold, I think you said
labor,
we have
materials, overhead, profits.
100,000 left of contingency as of now, around that?
We do. There's some debits and credits, and this is a fluid situation, if you will, because of what we're dealing with, you know, soils and pipes and 24-foot depth. And, but yes, that's about where we stand. It's going to fluctuate, so as we move forward.
Sure. Well, thanks, guys. No, keep going, let's
I'm gonna
finish
ask,
it.
this question doesn't,
Yeah.
ask our offline.
No, you,
No,
honestly, because
no,
we
this
just
is-
started
this
this
is
regular
good.
board meeting late, that's not against the law. We can't start it early, so I'd rather, let's do it.
So I think you had mentioned that Monroe County Water Authority had put their pipe over our pipe.
Yes, yeah, when they did the treatment plant, what, 10, 15 years ago, they ran a distribution main running from the lake south, and it went over top the existing sanitary sewer. You know, the record plans they had provided us were based on their design plans, and it turned out that it wasn't built per their original design plans. You know, lo and behold, when we discovered the issue, one of the inspectors from Water Authority came out and had a hand sketch of how it was actually built, but never got put into their system.
And shouldn't
So-
they be accountable for some of the expense?
So is that allowed for, you know, one line to go over, directly over another line?
It is generally, there's clearances that must be provided, generally it's 18 inches between water and sewer. And again, I think it was just a factor of, there was a lot of bedrock, high bedrock in that area, and I think they kept it as shallow as they could keep it. And we're barely able to get over the top of the existing sanitary sewer. So when we came through to replace that, you know, there was rock that needed to be chipped away, and there was fear that doing too much work close to this main could damage it. And the last thing the town wanted was a big water main break.
So it was, they were within the clearance, or they were outside of where they should have been? Should the pipe have been put where it was then, or not?
It should have been more separation between the two, and they did not build it that way. Just, I think, again, I can't speak for why the Water Authority did it the way they did it, but that's what was encountered in the field.
Is that something they should be held accountable for?
Another question could be answered in
Right.
2 minutes here, but theoretically, maybe.
I was just curious.
I would talk to Coke Fairlight if they want to pursue that, since they're 96% of this. Coke Fairlight, and I don't want to speak for them, you know, they will put a premium on speed much more than,
I
let's
get it.
stop the presses
I get it.
and see if we can, you know,
Save
save
it.
that.
I get it, I get it.
I think we all
Just
understand
asking
Yeah.
the question.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, well, then that concludes tonight's town board workshop. We'll go offline here and be back on in about 5 minutes, right, Mark?
Right.
All right. How much of the workshop did we get on tape?
That did not stream, but it's recorded and.
A reasonable question would be,